This is the Great Alaska Hunting Podcast. I'm Dalton Gray.
And I'm Moriah Humphries.
Broadcasting from our hometown of Fairbanks, Alaska. This show is brought to you by Stealthy Hunter. Thanks for listening and enjoy the show. Welcome back to the show, everybody. I'm Dalton Gray.
I'm Mo.
You're so stoic. Well, Happy New Year's, folks. We're glad that you're tuning into the show. Hope everybody had a Happy New Year celebration with family and friends and had a very Merry Christmas. We had a good Christmas.
We did.
Didn't get all of the guns and ammo and optics and reloading materials that we asked for on our list from Santa Claus, but...
No, it's funny. It seems like the more expensive the items get, the less chance there is of getting them.
I think Santa is being cheap.
See, I was told he's not, but it seems to be that way.
Not a real big spender, yeah. Either that or he's going woke and he's not wanting to buy us guns and ammo.
Maybe he just doesn't like us killing his reindeer.
Cancel Santa. We can start a new movement.
Hey, I mean, there's the whole thing going around about... Yeah, never mind. I'm not going to get into that.
Well, judging by the title of this episode, I'm sure you folks will be able to figure out that we're starting down a rabbit hole. There's been a lot of chatter amongst the hunting podcast world lately about cartridges, bullets, bullet types, and a lot of, I think, beneficial discussions. I've learned some things recently. I had a few opinions probably in the last year or so that I have watched sail off into the sunset. And I'm kind of dug in my heels a little bit on some of my formerly held opinions. And you and I have spent a fair amount of time. I know on our recent blacktail hunt, we spent a lot of time in camp, as one does on a hunt in Alaska in December with our waning daylight, which now we're past the solstice. So we're gaining it back. And then right about the time that we have enjoy all of our daylight, it'll start going away again.
Yeah, that's the way it works.
But while we were in deer camp together, we had a lot of discussions about some of these things, and we figured, you know what, we should do an episode on this. So this is going to be almost like a part 1 of 2 discussion. We're not going to go on too terribly long about it. It's going to be largely based on what we've done, what we've shot, the things that we have actually done in the field, the cartridges that we've shot, the bullets that we've shot, and we're going to break this up into 2 parts. And to start off with, we're going to talk about cartridges. Cartridges to hunt big game in Alaska. And in the next discussion, here in 2 weeks from this episode, we're going to talk about bullets. And we're not just going to talk about hammer bullets, even though they are one of our partners at the podcast here. We're also going to talk about other bullets that we have shot, because we have a pretty wide variety of things that we've shot over the years. And experimentation, I think, is part of the fun. And although we have been working with hammer bullets for a couple of years now, it's not been an exclusive thing. And there have been times where we have, out of necessity and lack of time or materials, reloading supplies have not always been easy to come by. And you and I weren't stockpiling pre-COVID.
No.
So we have been stuck in the whirlwind that is component shortages.
I started reloading right as COVID was really taking off, I think, or maybe a year after. Yeah,
I was about in the same boat. And so because of that, every once in a while through the last few years, we've continued to shoot other bullets where we had to. And then prior to that, we shot a lot of different bullets. I killed a moose this year with a Federal Terminal Ascent. I didn't have a hammer load for my 300 Win Mag, and I didn't really think too far ahead enough to get one made up. Not that we couldn't do it, not that we won't do it someday. We could, but I wanted to shoot that Terminal Ascent. I had wanted to shoot an animal with that bullet for a while. We recovered 3 out of 3 that were shot into that moose. We'll get into that later in the episode. So we hope everyone had a happy holiday season. Now that we're through that, we are in the winter time, which is our favorite time to talk about gear. That's when we all go gear shopping.
Right.
In the off season and tinker with things and do some reloading and do some shooting projects. And we have a few ideas about what we're going to do with that. But we'll leave that at that. So I guess just to kick off here, what have we shot in recent years? What did we kind of start out with hunting up here? You and I both kind of started hunting big game for ourselves at about the same time as teenagers, 15, 16 years old. You had killed a bear with a rifle when you were 12.
12, yeah.
When you were 12. But outside of that, you hadn't killed anything with a rifle outside of that, I don't think.
Not no big game, yeah.
Yeah. So, this being a big game mostly discussion.
It is, yeah.
We're going to keep it there. But both of us kind of started tinkering with things, and we both even started out with the same cartridge.
For the most part.
Which was?
30-06.
The Dirty 30. Which, as you will see, have a small display here. We have a lot more available that we could have on the table, but this is what we grabbed. 30-06. Arguably, one of the most common cartridges, probably even still today, used for big game hunting in Alaska.
Yeah, not as much as it was.
I would love to see the statistics on that. There's probably not a great way to get that metric aside from a few polls on a Facebook forum.
Right.
Which, the few that I've seen of, the 30-06 is still in the top 3, it seems like. Yeah.
In the top 3, so not always number 1, though.
No. I don't think that I've seen it as number 1.
So if you're
recently.
a guess a contender, what would it be?
300 Win Mag is usually the top.
That was my thought, too, yeah.
300 Win Mag has kind of taken over that top spot. The 7 Mag is always up there. And then you have your guys that are the 6.5, 308, something in that category. And then you have the 338 Win Mag or 375 H&H or...
And you get the PRCs and everything else.
Yeah, 300 PRC, 7 PRC. Those have, still relatively new on the scene, but probably growing pretty fast. But it's hard to tell without a user metric. I'm sure you could get some purchaser metrics and look at what people are buying now in Alaska.
Ammo-wise.
Right. What people are buying ammo for, what people are... But reloading...
Right.
You're just buying components. And there are a lot of reloaders that, but does that make up the majority of the population? And by the majority...
No, it doesn't.
As the majority, what's everybody shooting? So, maybe comment on the YouTube video what you like to shoot in Alaska, or you can write us into the show and let us know if you have something off the wall. There are those guys that like to shoot wildcats. I met somebody not too long ago that still likes to hunt with a 257 Roberts.
Yep.
He loves that cartridge. Loves it for deer, loves it for sheep. I want to say that he had killed a moose with it as well.
Really?
And then I was listening to a podcast not that long ago, and there was a gentleman on there that shot a 243 for moose, grizzly bears, everything. And I have only ever personally met one guy that shot a 243 for big game in Alaska. I hear about him. But I don't know anybody personally that does.
I met a guy one time who was running a 325 Winchester short mag.
Yep. That's a good cartridge.
It's a good cartridge, but you don't hardly ever hear about it.
Yeah.
I think he might be the only guy I know that had one.
I think I know guys that used to use one, and they moved nonsense. And part of it was components. Ammo? Yeah. Components or even factory ammo.
Right.
But outside of that, you have your common ones. You have the 30-06, you have the 270, 300 Win Mag, 7 Rem Mag, 338 Win Mag, and 375s. And then now you have a lot of 6.5s on that lower end. It used to be that the 308 was kind of what people would consider as the light one for whatever reason. I don't think it's that light. It has less velocity than a 06, but you can shoot almost the same weight class of bullets, just slower.
Right, it just cuts your range down.
It just cuts your range down, which, for a lot of Alaskan hunters that, including ourselves, really, for the most part, we're not shooting game past 300-400 yards, and even that is relatively uncommon. There's the occasional hunt where you're in very open terrain, and you require a little bit more ballistic capability, if you will, but that's not the norm. Most of our shots, our deer hunt here in December, none of us, out of the 4 of us, shot a deer at over 100 yards.
My first one was.
Oh, that's right.
That buck on the beach was. It was closer, at least 150.
You're right. I forgot about that deer.
Other than that, though.
Right. So everything else that was in the timber was 100 yards or less. Remy had a shot on a muskeg that was about 100 yards that he said, but he didn't even range it. So it could have been a little bit less, a little bit more. Mm-hmm. But when you're hunting in the timber, as a rule of thumb, your shots are usually going to be 50 or less. And that's what most of the rest of ours were, and that made up 9 out of the 11 deer that we shot, well under 100 yards, some being bow range, which we had someone write in about that too.
Yeah, 3 of my 4 were bow range.
Did you see his message?
I did.
Yeah.
I've thought, that's a good idea. I don't know if I want to risk it. I don't know. You know, I'm sure you go back and forth on it every year.
I brought my first compound to deer camp.
Did you?
The first year that I had it. And it didn't leave camp.
I might bring one next year.
I keep thinking about it, and now that we've found some more spots that might be more conducive to it.
It's just the overall logistics too.
Yeah.
Right? If you're bringing a rifle and a bow, well, that's a whole nother...
That's 2 hard cases.
Right. And now that we figured out some of the logistics of traveling, better ways to get weight down there and everything, and all that, like that really opens up. A couple of hard cases isn't that big of a deal anymore.
Right. So we both started out with a 30-06.
Yeah.
And then we both moved on to, what did you move on to?
I've got a 300 Winchester short mag.
And that was your step away from the 06.
Well, actually, for a very short period of time, I had a 300 Win mag.
Oh, that's right.
Okay, so I had that thing for, how long did I hunted with it. I never killed anything with it. But it was an old, beat up, wore out, Savage 110 or 111. No, 110. I remember I knew what all the numbers meant. I looked at all figured out one time. But it was this weird model made in the 90s. And they only made it for a few years, and it's really hard to find parts for and all that kind of stuff.
And why did you need to find parts for it?
I was looking for stocks and stuff.
But then after you stopped hunting with it, why did you need parts for it?
The reason I stopped hunting with it, because the barrels and stuff aren't different.
Right.
But the parts that were different was the mag feeding was the biggest thing that was different. But I rolled my wheeler with that rifle strapped to it, and I bent the barrel.
Yeah.
So that was no longer a option. I went back to 30-06 for a while, probably killed a few things with it.
Yeah.
And then I decided I wanted a 7 Rem mag.
Yeah.
And somebody sold me a 300 short mag instead.
Well, when the price is right.
When the price is right, and I do not regret that one bit. I love that short mag.
Yeah, you've killed a pile of animals with that short mag.
I probably like that short mag as much as you like your 7 Rem mag.
Probably.
Yeah.
Yep, that's very likely. I went to a 7 mag probably a few years in, I would say. It wasn't very long, and that was for a few different reasons. I thought at the time that I wanted to be able to stretch my range out a lot farther.
Right.
I had a little bit more interest in shooting what I would call long-range hunting, which is past a quarter mile. Anything inside of that, you can pretty confidently shoot with very, I hesitate to say very little range time, because that's a dangerous box to open up.
It is.
But our range here in town, just to go to the bench and shoot, you can shoot out to 330.
Well, my biggest issue in all this, reason I went to, the 300 short mag eventually, was the same thing, right? I think you'd had the 7 Rem mag for a little while, and I went for the same thing. I want to be able to reach out farther more confidently.
Yeah.
Now, what I didn't understand at the time, or maybe you didn't either, was it wasn't the cartridge that was holding me back.
Yeah.
It was my rifle and scope.
Yeah.
Really, that was the primary.
Absolutely. And looking back at it now, 10 plus years later, I was in the same boat.
Yeah. I have the same rifle and scope still.
I could have stretched my original 06 out well beyond a quarter mile and done just fine with the right bullet and the right load. All that not being my forte at the time. I was very green, and I'm still learning. But I chose the 7 mag, and I bought a over-the-counter rifle at Sportsman's, bought a scope. I spent more money on a rifle than I ever had before, and I still have the rifle.
What was that one? Was it the Christensen?
That was the Christensen Mesa. Nothing fancy. It's not the high-end model. And this was prior to Christensen's issues that they had for a stretch of time there, that they're still seemingly dealing with. Although, from what I've heard, they've made a lot of improvements recently in the last year, and some things have changed at the brand. And they seem to have fixed a few of their issues that they were dealing with on a regular basis. And with any mass-produced factory weapon, going to have defects.
Right.
even if you buy something that everybody says is an old standby reliable gun like a Tikka.
Right.
It's a great gun for the money. You can't argue with that. But even a Tikka could have an issue.
You can.
It's man-made.
And every Tikka has its weak points, which I think is the magazine.
The magazine, the stock is not made with that high quality material.
Right. Some of the newer stocks are better. Depending on which one you go with. But.
Right, but yeah, that's a whole different debate. I mean,
right, but you're buying how much?
Some of their newer stocks that look different are in fact just
the same
painted differently.
Better paint job, a little more texture.
Yeah.
But I mean, you're not when you buy what is it now? A $1,200 gun for a base Tikka, which is insane to me that they're that much.
Well, the base ones aren't that much.
How much are the base ones?
Between $700 and $850.
Are they really?
Yeah.
I haven't seen one then for forever. I feel like. Now you don't see the base ones as often as you used to. Either.
Right. It seems like locally a lot more of the slightly higher
and that
models.
might be where I've got that impression from. But even if you spend $1,100 or $1,200 on a gun, you're not buying an $800 stock.
Right.
I mean, that's the difference, really.
Yeah.
Stocks. I think the stocks on a Tikka.
There are thousands of animals around the world that are just as dead as if they were shot with a $10,000 custom rifle, and they were killed with a $700 Tikka.
Yeah, or less.
Or less. Yeah. My 243 is blued, unchanged from the factory.
That's right.
And that is the base model Tikka. It's blued, nothing fancy about it, but great little gun for what I use it for. But getting back on topic here with what we've used, so 30-06, and then I went to the 7 mag. I did put better glass on it, stretched it out some, shot a couple animals at distances that I was I'd been practicing a lot at that time, and I have not shot an animal at those ranges since then, and that's for a variety of different reasons. But not that it didn't work; it just didn't tickle my fancy. It wasn't what I really thought it was going to be. I didn't get the joy out of it that I thought I would have, and I found that I enjoyed getting closer more than I enjoyed the practice and the shooting of long range. Now, I still like to stretch out and shoot several hundred yards whenever I can, and we have a spot that you and I have gone to quite a bit, and we can stretch out to a half a mile if we want to and shoot 800 plus yards.
Right.
That's not to say that we're going to shoot animals at that distance, even if a cartridge is capable of it.
Right.
But it's fun to practice at. It's fun to test velocities. It's fun to test what your group size is. Like really, if your gun is shooting sub 1 inch at 100 yards, can you hold a tight group at 400 yards?
Right.
Hold a tight group. And how tight of a group can you hold at that distance? That's a hard thing to do.
Right. Well, and it comes down to, like, just because you can do really good off a bench at 400 yards doesn't mean you're going to do really good field at 400 yards.
Right.
Especially if you can't get prone.
Right.
You don't have a nice tripod to shoot off of or whatever.
Right.
Like
shooting off your pack.
So shooting 800 yards or even 500 yards is just that extra stretch that gets you more comfortable when an animal's closer than that.
Right.
Right. And the more comfortable you are, the less stress, the less your heart's beating.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I can practice reliably with a round out to 500 yards on a target, then I don't have a problem making a 300-yard shot or a 450-yard shot because I've done that before. I've done it a lot before.
You know what it's doing. Yeah.
Right. So moving on from that, really from there, with this discussion, this is not to say that there is any advising to be done with people that are coming to Alaska or that are in Alaska and are in search of a cartridge. And we're separating cartridge from caliber here. Caliber is your bore diameter. 45 is a bore diameter. But a 45 ACP is a very different round from a 4570 government.
Right. And they're a different bore diameter. 45 ACP is 452, 4570 is 458.
Well, I have been gotten.
You didn't know that?
I knew that and then I forgot it.
Oh, okay.
Because you mentioned it a long time ago and I forgot it. Well,
it's 452 or 451. It's really, at that point, it's not as big of a deal. But
But point being, it's not the same.
It's not the same. No.
A 30-06 is not a 300 PRC.
Nope.
Bore diameter, very different cartridge. So the cartridge is what we're focusing on here. There's a lot of discussion about cartridges. There's been a lot of innovation in the cartridge field. There has been a lot of innovation in the bullet field, I think, that has been more so the driver of the cartridges.
Right.
Because we've seen in the hunting industry, and more so in the shooting world, really, on the production side, you go back to the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, and the craze was get faster, get faster, get faster.
Right.
And like in the beginnings of Weatherby.
Mm-hmm.
And their focus was, Roy's focus was on building bigger cartridges
mm-hmm.
with a lot of propellant that can drive a moderate or even a lightweight bullet at blinding speeds. Some of that was pre-rangefinder days.
That's true.
You don't have a rangefinder. So if you can increase your maximum point blank range out to 400 yards and be in the kill zone at anywhere from 50 to 400,
mm-hmm.
then you have a higher chance of hitting your target.
Right.
That ups your chances. Nowadays, we have rangefinders that will Bluetooth to our scope. We have binoculars with a rangefinder in them that'll Bluetooth to your scope. We don't have that. We haven't used that yet.
Not yet.
But I've had clients that have had that. It's pretty sweet technology.
Not to run the train off the track here, but just a real quick question. Have you ever had a client with a new Leupold rangefinder? The one that pairs to your phone and gives you a point on your map?
Nope.
Not yet. Okay.
Nope. I just saw something about that.
I want to try that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's an interesting discussion that we'll have to have some other time.
Back on tracks.
But now with the capabilities of rangefinders and ballistics, mathematics that we can just plug in numbers, even if you don't have all that stuff, you can take a chronograph to the gun range, chronograph your load, get your ballistic coefficient, even just from the manufacturer's website,
mm-hmm.
plug that simple data of your velocity, your ballistic coefficient into a ballistics. You don't even have to have an app. Go on your web browser.
Yeah, you can just put it into Google. Honestly, these days, something like I haven't tried all of them.
Shooter's calculator.
But I have tried some of the AI personal help AI assistants. Google's got one built in. Everybody has one now.
Boy,
some are a lot better than others, but I have tried at least one of those that gives me very good data. When
really?
I plug in data, I give it, this is my BC, this is my muzzle velocity, and it'll just crank it all out. And it's like, somehow it found the math somewhere and figured it all out, and it does a very good job of it.
Interesting. But that being said, we have access to a lot of information that those guys didn't have.
Right. They didn't even have this.
And what is this?
This is Ammo and Ballistics 6th edition, 2017, 190 cartridges. Factory data out to 1,000 yards. We've got, let's go to a different one. 7 rem mag, Winchester 150 grain, PowerPoint, muzzle velocity 30-90. At 100, it goes to 20-31. Gives you your drop, gives you your wind drift.
Does it give you a barrel length?
It does tell you what the barrel length is at the beginning. Gives you a BC of every bullet, as in ballistic coefficient. So this is a great reference. But I think one big issue we have today is that most people, if they had the slot of the page from this book of the cartridge they were using, just that one line, they would take that, probably not even tape it to the stock of their gun, but let's just say they went that far, tape it to the stock of their gun, and that's what they would go. They'd go shoot at 100 yards, 0, and they'd go hunt, which is a really, really bad idea.
Without verifying velocity.
Right. Because, like he said, does it have your barrel length? So these, for this 7 rem mag, were tested on a 24-inch long, 1 9.5 twist barrel.
Yeah.
Right? That's going to change everything. Just your barrel length will change a lot.
Yeah.
So this is a great reference.
Right.
Right? And you can take this, test those numbers.
Yeah.
And then mark out. Yeah. You can say, okay, well, at 100, I'm not that, I'm this.
Yeah.
And change your drop accordingly and get something of an idea to get somewhere when you shoot at 400 yards.
Right.
But it's not a hard and fast resource to hunt.
You have to verify all of that data.
Yeah.
That's the same thing as like shooting at 400 yards by using box velocity data.
This is box velocity data.
Right. It's a nice thing to have just to look at.
Yeah.
To say, you know what, I'm interested in getting one of these.
Yep.
And if you like to collect books like that and data collections, then that's a nice little tool to have. But it doesn't replace verifying your velocity and verifying your drops at different ranges.
Right.
Out to at least as far as you're going to shoot an animal at. So with that being the case, we've come a long ways now to having very sleek, heavy for caliber, and in a lot of cases, heavy for caliber, modern bullets that have changed the capabilities of
everything.
Sure.
Basically.
Everything. For instance, 30-06. Mm-hmm. I remember when Hornady came out with their ELDX bullet years ago, and looking at the ballistic coefficient of that 178 grain factory loaded ELDX, and the velocity that it shot it at was no different than a traditional .6 with a 180 grain class bullet. Mm-hmm. But the ballistic coefficient was greatly increased from more traditional 180 grain class bullets.
Right.
Now, there are a lot of other bullets that came pre-ELDX, for instance, like the Nosler AccuBond, some of the Barnes LRX bullets, like the 175 LRX, that was it still is a relatively high ballistic coefficient, 30 caliber that you can load in the .6. But the 178 ELDX was at the time, I believe, to be one of the best performing bullets if you're looking at just the numbers. If that's the kind of bolt that you wanted to shoot, then you could stretch it out farther. You had a lot less wind drift, and velocity all of a sudden became, I don't want to say irrelevant, but a lot less relevant.
Right.
Because now, I mean, in the last 10 years, what is the single most talked about, hated, and loved cartridge on the market?
6.5 Creedmoor.
And why is that?
Because it's easy to shoot, and, well, it's everywhere.
Because it defies everything that everybody thought about a cartridge and what a cartridge needed to be for big game hunting for a long, long time.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
It's slow. It shoots relatively light bullets, but people are killing moose with them.
Right, because what is that, a 264? Right?
Yep.
Which
shooting
really,
on the high end, if you really push it, I'm not sure if you could push something like 150 grain plus class burger out of it, but the average factory loading when it, like for the Hornady Precision Hunter factory ammo, is 143 grain ELDX. You're looking at something that was 270 weight class and going slower, somewhere around 2,700 feet a second with a 143 grain bullet. But the drop was less. The wind deflection was far less than any other cartridge in its category for its time, because it was taking advantage of bullet technologies that other cartridges were not built around. And a lot of people, myself included, when I started out, would look at a cartridge and say, yeah, I can shoot this weight class bullet at this varying velocity. That means I can shoot out to with this load, and I can kill up to this big of an animal with this gun, because that's just what computed in my mind. Now, and for the last several years, I'm looking at a bullet selection before a cartridge.
Yeah.
And that's how a lot of these rounds are built, seemingly, from our perspective. I'm sure there's a lot more that goes into it on the manufacturing side and on the ballistic engineer's perspective of things. But when the bullet technology allows you to create a cartridge that's shorter overall, you can build it on a short action. You're using a lot less propellant.
Right.
And it does realistically the same job. The animal is just as dead. It's not the super banger whopper magnum cartridge that we've always loved and cherished in the US of A. The United States has traditionally been, in the hunting market, we like the magnums, the 300 Win Mag,
we
the
like
7
the magnums,
Ram Mag.
We like the big round numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or the big numbers, right?
Right.
I say a 257 Robert, right?
Yeah.
Big. But it's a big sounding number. It's not a big, but it sounds big. And that's the way a lot of our cartridges were for a long time. The 325 short mag.
Yeah.
Right? The same thing. It's an 8 mil.
And then you went through the 90s with the advents of the Ultra Mags from Remington.
Yeah.
And you just took the 300 Win mag and blew it up. The 7 Rem mag and blew it up. There was a 338 Ultra mag, and that's probably one of, well, that one and the 300 Ultra mag are still around. Seems like somewhat commonly. The 375 Ultra mag, I probably know 2 people, maybe, that still
that
shoot
one you
that.
don't see as much. What about a 375 Weatherby?
I know one person that has one.
378 Weatherby.
I don't know anybody that has one.
That's really getting up there.
But people always thought, well, bigger is better. Bigger is better.
Right.
More powder, more velocity.
More bullet.
Heavier, yeah, more bullet. But now, we're finding out over the last number of years that if you have a highly efficient, slippery bullet, the high ballistic coefficient relative to the cartridge, relative to the bore diameter, really, then you can get away with less velocity.
Right.
And it performs better.
So you mentioned the 270 and the 6.5 Creedmoor.
Yeah.
And how the 6.5 Creedmoor can perform better
than the 270 Winchester. Yeah.
But today, if you, now not from factory loads necessarily, but with hand loading, you could make that 270 perform like a factory loaded 6.5 Creedmoor.
Better than if you had the right barrel. This is the
correct.
This is the next part of where I wanted to go with that.
So even if you don't have the right barrel, just hear me out. You find the right bullet that fits your application, especially with some of the monolithics, right? Sure, you can't quite go as heavy,
right?
But then you can increase speed a lot more than the 270 was really meant to do originally, and that gives you the advantages, right? With even a bullet that's still higher BC than was available 30 years ago,
right?
And you can take, with hand loads, you can take almost any cartridge and make it so much more than it ever was before. What we're seeing with like a 6.5 Creedmoor is they took that and just put it in a cartridge. And that's what this whole advent of new cartridges is all about, right? And they're optimizing the cartridge for a barrel, for a gun. That is, the whole thing is designed around these new concepts. You can still take an old cartridge, and I think it's quite fun to do, right? I have a 30-30 with a 120 grain going 2,800 feet per second.
Yeah.
It kills like crazy. It's awesome, right? But you told somebody that 30 years ago, they would have looked at you sideways.
Yeah.
Why would you do that, and how?
Yeah.
Right? And it's a really accurate. It's fast. It's got like way further kill range than I ever would shoot a lever action rifle with an 18-inch barrel. Yeah. But anyway.
It punches above its weight class.
Well, much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But with that next step being barrels. So you say, okay, I have a 270. Now we have bullets that are more slippery. For instance, Hornady makes 145 grain ELDX. That might stabilize in a 1 in 10 twist barrel, which is common in a 270, but it might not. I don't know. I haven't run the numbers on it.
Yeah, I don't know. I would think it would. The ELDX is usually stabilized pretty well. Yeah.
Probably. But if you want to go even heavier in a 270 bore diameter, say up to 160 plus grains or even 170 plus grains, it's not going to happen in a 1 in 10 twist barrel.
Right. At least not with the modern bullets.
So that's where introduce the 6.8 Western.
Right. Which hasn't been
shorter case,
even that popular. But
shorter case, less powder, more efficient, shorter action. And the factory bullets, when it came out, was 175 grain, I think, Sierra something or other, and then 168 grain bullet. At any rate, you're up in the 170 grain class bullets. That is far above what the original 270 was designed to do, was shoot a 130 grain bullet at 3,000 feet a second. And that 160 plus grain bullet is going to far outrun, even though it's a smaller cartridge, the case geometry, all of that goes into
density.
Right. Yeah. And so now you have a 270 caliber with a different cartridge mated with modern ideas. Now, the biggest difference is you can't just take those 270 bullets, bore diameter bullets, and put those in a 270 Winchester. They won't stabilize. It's not going to work. So then you have to buy a new barrel. If you can do that, then that's a great way to change things up. But your chamber is not going to be meant to accept those long of bullets. Your magazine's probably not going to be meant to accept that long of bullet.
Do they even have the same bolt face?
That's a question
I don't think they do. They may, but I don't believe they do.
Sure. I'm not talking about rechambering. just rebarreling to shoot different bullets that are available.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, okay, yeah.
So the idea is great to have new cartridges that punch above their weight class or what was thought to be their weight class.
Right.
Now their abilities are greatly increased. Does that make the old standby rounds obsolete? The answer is no. It doesn't. It just means that if that's your thing, you can do it.
Mm-hmm.
You're not hemmed in by that. If you want to shoot a relatively light recoiling cartridge that's easy to reload for, you're probably going to get more than acceptable accuracy out of most factory guns for hunting purposes, which will say 400 yards or less. And you can afford to put a scope on it with some kind of a dial. You could probably buy a 6.5 Creedmoor over the counter, put a scope on it that's $500 or less, and have well under $2,000 into that gun and buy factory ammo and be able to shoot a half a mile with it.
Yeah. Easy.
Probably very
easily. You gotta pick up the right gun.
Right. It's just extremely well designed. And that comes from the case geometry and the chamber specifications that go along with that. And that's not always been the case. But if that's not your thing, then you don't need to worry about all that. You don't need to consider how capable your round is out to a half a mile.
Right.
You and I have both met people that say, well, although I might not want to shoot an animal at a half a mile, I want my round to be able to reach there in case I have to have backup shots.
Yeah, I've heard that. Heard that from more than one person.
The reality is most of us don't need a round that's capable of making a half a mile long backup shot.
Right.
Most of us would say, if it made it that far from the first impact, I'm going to have to just catch up to it anyway.
Yeah.
That's what I would say. I wouldn't go sling and lead at something 800 yards away. Just because...
Not that it's running.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's moving, most likely. Right. So those speculations shouldn't weigh in on your primary cartridge choice. Pick something that's well made for the task that you want it to do. Another thing that we're going to just briefly touch on here is defense from bears. In Alaska and in some of the lower 48 states as well, Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, where you could run into a grizzly bear. But up here in Alaska specifically, a very common question is, what round do I choose
for bears? Yeah.
For bears. Even if they're going moose hunting, they're thinking, what if I get charged by a bear?
What you do is you carry your moose rifle, you throw a 12 gauge on your back, and you got a pistol strapped to each leg, and a can of bear spray underneath your vinyl harness.
Yeah.
Then you're covered.
Yeah. Right. The reality is neither of us have ever had to stop a bear charge while on a hunt for another animal.
Right.
Hasn't happened. Not to say that it won't someday, but it hasn't happened yet. And between you and I, we've spent a lot of time in the field over the last decade.
We have.
A lot of time. In heavy bear country.
Yep.
We were in bear country deer hunting, and you carried an AR chambered in
6mm arc.
Which is not, according to hunter's lore, a bear stopper.
No.
Not at all.
And I don't think it would stop a bear quickly.
I think with a bullet in the right spot, it would change his mind.
Sure. And it would kill it.
I absolutely think it would kill it.
It just, so I had a backup. I had a 10mm on my side as a backup. If I unloaded 10 rounds of 88 grain monolithics into that bear, and I still was able to get my hand on a pistol, I had it there with some 200 grain. What are those? The Underwood
hard casts,
right?
Those are those coated hard.
And I had 15 of those in the mag.
Yep. Well, there you go.
Right, but
that's still not your primary choice. If
neither
a bear
one
jumped out at you, but in that
Mm-hmm.
that particular instance, if a bear jumped out in the trail in front of you, you wouldn't have let your rifle hang on your chest and grab your pistol.
No,
you'd have shot it with your rifle. I don't know that I would hunt with a round in a rifle. For me personally, I don't think I would hunt with a rifle round that I felt more comfortable with a pistol as a backup in a bear charge situation.
I feel more comfortable with that pistol. I still would much rather shoot it with that rifle.
Absolutely. But for instance, I don't think I would go deer hunting with a 22-250 in heavy bear country and then think to myself, all right, if I see a bear and I have a situation, I'm just going to draw my pistol. I don't think I would hunt with that rifle round.
Yeah.
Some guys do, and that's totally fine. That's up to you. My decision is I'm not going to do that. I would rather have a rifle that is superior to my pistol. And a 22-250 with the right bullet going well over 3,000 feet a second is not going to do any small amount of damage to a bear. It just wouldn't be my first choice.
Right.
So there is a line there somewhere. And I think that everybody, at the end of the day, don't let anybody else make your decisions for you.
Yeah, I know that. That's a big deal, because I know, especially when I was younger, I would talk to people who I looked up to, and there was a lot of people that I put a lot more. I don't know if a lot of people. There was a few people I put a lot more stock in what they had to say than really what it meant, right? Just because I thought they were, I thought they were cool or whatever, especially as a teenager. And so somebody would say something. For instance, one guy said, and at the time I kind of wasn't sure what to think about it. It didn't make a lot of sense, but it did to some extent influence me. And he said, "No real moose hunter uses barns," which makes zero sense. A barns is a great moose bullet, right? Killed moose with barns. I'm sure you've killed moose with barns. Got a lot of critters with barns. But he said that, and to some extent, it affected my thought process about it, right? And those kinds of things, especially if there's somebody you look up to or you think a lot about, and so you're going to say, okay, well, I'm going to buy a 6.5 Creedmoor, but everybody's going to think it's gay. I'm just going to say it, right? It's gay, right? I'm buying a 6.5 Creedmoor.
That's not exactly how I'd put it.
But you know what I mean? That there are those that would say that, maybe even me. Except that now I'm looking at them like, why don't I just buy one of these things? There's ammo everywhere for them. They're so easy to find.
People are going to love that you said that.
I'm thinking about, yeah, I know, right? I'm thinking at this point, and my, just a year or two ago, I would have been like, oh, no way. But at this point, I'm like, why don't I just buy a 6.5 Creedmoor and a 308? We talk about ammo availability, right? Functionality. Because, and while a 30-06 did everything we really ever needed to do, a 308 really does too.
Yep.
Right? And so much of it is just, if you are competent enough to hunt with one thing, you're competent enough to hunt with another. And if you need, I bought a 375 recently. I plan on taking it moose hunting. Why do I want to take a 375 moose hunting? Is it because I'm a bad shot, or because I might need to break through a shoulder? It's because when I hit it, I want it to go down, or I hit it and I don't have to carry it a step further than I need to. Right?
I'm not going to argue with you.
Right, but that's a good, that is the reason for it for me, not because I feel like I need distance or anything like that. I want just to hit it hard, and I want it to drop. I'm not going to shoulder shoot it. That destroys too much meat. Yeah,
but shoulder shooting a moose with a 30-06 still destroys a lot of meat.
Oh, it does, exactly. But to the same point, if shooting a moose, a good vital shot in a moose, not hitting the shoulder with a 30-06 is just fine, and so is a 308, and so is a 270, and as long as you're within your limits for any of these, so is a 6.5 Creedmoor, right? Now, what's very common, I think, on the internet today is videos of somebody trying to shoot an elk at 700 yards with a 6.5 Creedmoor with a match-grade bullet. At least it was. You would see that.
Yeah.
Right?
I've seen the videos, yeah.
And you say, what an idiot.
Yeah.
Why would you do that? Because, right, I have a personal friend who was like, man, I shot this moose, and he shot like a 50-inch plus moose, 300 Win Mag. He goes, and man, I shot it, and it just didn't go down, and I had to shoot it like 4 or 5 times before it finally like went down. Right? And he's shooting a 300 Win Mag. That's a really decent cartridge.
Oh, yeah.
You should have lots of punch.
Excellent.
And he pulls out a box. He's got a box of ammo, right? He's got an ammo box, and he's pulling out boxes like, which one was it? Which one? Oh, it was this one. See, it says hunting on it. And it was Berger hunting bullets. But for a moose, they just came apart. They just kept, he shot it, but they just were coming apart.
And you said that those ones were grenading just underneath the skin and not even getting into the lungs.
Yeah, I didn't personally see the animal.
Oh, okay.
But based on what he told me happened, that had to be what happened. because he goes, no, we cut it up and they were all like right in the right spot and all this stuff took forever. Like
weren't going in far enough sometimes. Yeah.
And and I don't know if he hit in the shoulder a few times or whatnot too, sure. But
there's a lot of variables when you have.
There's so many variables.
Well, and then when you have like that third party relation.
Right.
Of the story.
Not being there and yeah.
You weren't at the carcass to inspect it and do your little, autopsy and
necropsy.
And cut into the chest cavity and look at the lungs and see if a bullet did pass through both lungs and kind of check all that out. But just by the surface, it seems like that's what happened. I shot a moose this year with a 300 Win Mag, but I didn't shoot it in the lungs with my first shot. I shot it in the neck, which is a risk, but that bull was going to walk away. He'd spotted us. He'd picked us out. I'd been calling him in for well over an hour, and he wasn't going to stick around for the show. There was a cow bellowing behind him as soon as he came into view of me, and I had a window about, well, I don't remember exactly how wide it was, but it wasn't real wide. And it was about an 80-yard shot, 80 or 90 yards. And as he turned to walk away, all I could see was his neck. And so I shot him right square in the neck. And he went down like a sack of rocks. And I immediately followed up on him and walked over and shot him in the lungs. And that did him in. But not to say that that's a situation where you could have used any bullet, but probably, because at that point I'm not looking to penetrate through that much of a rib cage through.
However, the neck is a lot more dense.
It is,
depending on the angle of the neck and how. Yeah, there's so much. Like I say, there's a lot of variables. Right.
And I knew that I was taking a chance shooting him in the neck like that. I knew that when I did it, and it's not advisable. But I shot a black bear in the head with my bow last spring. That's not advisable either, but that's a whole different story. And we talked about that with Brad in the previous episode. But people like to, going back to the bear defense thing, people like to pick out a cartridge to hunt with based on the what if. And that's not really necessary. You should be more focused on what's a cartridge that if I'm not reloading for, I can buy a lot of factory ammo, shoot it a lot, and practice a lot with it. That I'm not going to flinch every time it goes off. That I don't have to have a muzzle brake on to tame the recoil so that I can actually shoot it well. Because you'll still develop a flinch by shooting a muzzle brake all the time too. Because that concussion and that noise will trigger the same reaction with your trigger finger and a flinch as heavy recoil will over time. And that's a thing that you have to constantly work on. You have to constantly keep that in the forefront of your shooting thought process, that you're not going to develop bad habits. But shoot a cartridge that you can comfortably practice with and get ammo for if you're not going to reload. If all you're ever going to do is hunt in the lower 48 and then maybe once or twice in your lifetime come up to Alaska, there is still absolutely nothing wrong with shooting a 30-06.
Right.
Or a 270. If you really want to do it, a 6.5 Creedmoor. Now we have a lot more options. Now we have the 6.5 PRC, which is a Creedmoor but faster. A different case, but it adds a couple hundred feet a second to it. So if you want to shoot a little bit heavier bullets, you can push them a little bit faster. It pushes that 143 closer to 3,000. Okay, whereas the Creedmoor is about 2750 or so. So that's there are more options now than we ever had before, and that's obviously that's a given, right? New rounds come out every year, and I wonder what's going to come out this next year. But you don't have to pick a round on the what if. Odds are probably not going to have a bear charge you. Odds are that if you did, and if you're on your toes and using your head, a single shot from that 6.5 PRC in the right spot is going to solve the problem. It might not flatten it, but again, looking at statistics of bear encounters where they were shot with a rifle, your odds of getting bit are pretty low. I'm not going to carry around a rifle that's going to put a grizzly bear on his rear end if I shoot him on a full charge, because that would be some kind of an African safari rifle, like a .458 lot, or a nitro of some sort.
What do you think about a Rigby? Big enough?
A 416?
Yeah.
It could, but
depends on the size of the bear.
I shot a brown bear with a 416 one time.
That's why I'm asking.
It didn't knock it over.
Yeah.
I've seen other bears shot with 416s. It doesn't knock them over. It punches a little bit bigger hole. They seem to notice a little bit more.
Right.
But it doesn't just knock them over flat. And that's the thing is, people talk about knockdown power. I think that's a very very debatable topic to get into, much like energy, kinetic energy upon impact.
Are we talking about energy?
I don't give it much validity because terminal ballistics, which is how bullets kill,
right,
is the disruption of vital function. And I think we've mentioned this before, but if you disrupt vital function, it'll die. If you shoot a grizzly bear with a full metal jacket out of a 223, it's going to kill it.
Right.
It might not kill it very fast, but it might if the bullet tumbles and it tears those lungs apart, it'll kill it. And you don't need as much penetration as you might think you do. A moose chest cavity isn't terribly wide from inside a rib to inside a rib.
Oh, right.
And lungs are not a hard medium to shoot through. It's air. It's a bag of air. Mm-hmm. There's no femurs in the lungs. Now, you can make the argument of a quartering shot. If you have a hard quartering away shot and you want to put that bullet at the back of the ribs and shoot through the stomach contents and then continue up through the chest cavity.
Right.
That's where I stand on things. That's why I don't shoot something terribly small for something like moose or brown bears. Now, for brown bears, it's a little bit different. In just for the case of a guide with backup shots. When I'm guiding a brown bear hunt, I carry a 375 for the most part. I did carry a 338 RPM for one season. It worked fine. I'm not going to get into all of the details of that, but it worked fine. I shot a moose on a backup shot situation where the client had shot it a little bit high, and it upon us going closer for him to finish it off because it was still very much alive and kicking, he'd hit it high in the above the rib cage. Not really above the rib cage, but up towards the hump, and it just shocked it. It stunned it, and he shot it with a 300 Win Mag at 150-ish yards. It was low light. He made a shot. Moose just sacked and went down. Feet went up in the air, and he's still kicking and going. So I said, we got to go right now. We get up to about 40 yards. He puts one in the ribs. As soon as his gun goes off and he shot it in the ribs, the moose jumped back up to his feet and ran full speed for the middle of the river. And I did not want to pack that moose across that river. So I pulled up my rifle and shot it. And it went down after 2 shots. I hit it once, kept on running, reloaded again, shot him again, and then he just nosedived into the gravel bar. Would a 300 Win Mag have done that? Probably. Very likely.
A lot of the effect we're talking about here, though, is bullet selection.
But then you have the argument of, and this is a saying, there's no replacement for displacement. So the bigger the bullet, the bigger the frontal diameter, the bigger the displacement, the
more expansion of the bullet.
In theory, the bigger the wound channel is going to be, the more damage there will be, so therefore the faster the reaction will be to that damage. I see what they're talking about.
It's true.
That's why I carry a 375 for brown bear guiding, because my shots are not going to be a perfect broadside shot. If I have to shoot a client's bear in a backup situation, if he's headed for the brush, then I need the most amount of damage that I can get within reason with a cartridge that can be shoulder fired. If I could shoot something bigger and have good ammo availability or have a rifle that I wanted to pay for, I would shoot a 416.
$100 a shot.
Right. I've looked into getting a 416 of to the tune of the 416 Remington and of the 416 Ruger. And at some point I'll probably end up with one, but I just haven't made the jump to it because I have 375s. I have 375 components, and it works fine. I don't feel that I need to go up any more than that. But I go with a 375 over my 300 Win Mag or my 7 mag or a .06 because it does more damage.
It's the amount of damage you do. As long as you disrupt vital function, you're killing it.
Right. How fast?
But how fast are you killing it? And that's where it comes back to a 375 with the right bullet. Drop a moose.
I know I know a handful of guys. The fellow that I went with this year, his dad has shot 375 Ruger on moose, and that's why he shoots it with a 375.
It just makes sense to me. For most part, when I'm moose hunting, I ain't backpacking nowhere, so the rifle weight isn't that big of a deal.
Right.
And there's just and if I do need to reach out to 200 or 300 yards,
you can.
I can, and it's a big old bullet. So it's going to not do much less damage at that distance than it is at 100, right?
Yeah.
Versus something with some, I don't know. It seems like the best use of it to me. I'm not a backup shooter on bears, and so if I went on a brown bear hunt, might I take the 375? Would I take my 45-70? Would I take a bow? I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah.
There's a lot of options.
Right.
It's more gun in the arsenal, and I had to have a purpose for it. So,
well, this is an important point to make. It's fun to experiment.
Yeah.
That's why we have different cartridges. At the end of the day, there isn't a necessity to have a 7 rem mag and a 300 Win mag.
And a 30-06.
And a 30-06.
And a 45-70.
I could do everything between the 06, the 300 Win mag, the 7 rem mag. I could do all of that with one of those.
Yep.
But it's fun, something different.
And we're Americans.
It's fun to experiment.
We have the option. It's people who are into cars buy more than one car, not because they need it.
Right.
Because they like them.
So don't misunderstand our discussions of different cartridges and what we've shot as being
that's a good point.
A necessity for change.
I'm not bringing up the 375 for moose as if you should too.
Right.
I wanted a 375. I got a good deal on one opportunity came up to buy it, so I did, and kind of thought, I think I'll do that with that. I think it's a good use for it.
It'll be fun to do it.
It makes sense, right? I like the idea of that better than like a 38 Ultra Mag or something like a lot of guys use for moose.
The recoil 338 Ultra Mag is a lot more vicious than that 375 Ruger.
It makes a lot of sense to me to do it.
Yeah.
And
we already have some load data for it.
Yeah, we do. And and I took that 6 arc here.
Yep.
Which I liked. I liked it a lot. But I tell you, the disruption in vital function was a lot, but it wasn't as much as a 300 short mag.
Yep.
And I saw that on every deer I shot this year.
Yep.
I had a lot more room for error on that 300 short mag.
Yep. The other thing that you need to consider is not every animal is going to die the same. You could shoot 2 moose on consecutive days in the exact same spot.
Right, with the exact same bullet.
And one will fall down upon impact,
yep.
And one is going to stand there for 30 seconds and wobble and look around, maybe even walk 20 yards, and then he'll fall down.
A great example of that is the bears I shot this spring.
Yep.
I shot a 6-foot bear with a 45-70, 276 grain hollow point, right? 2,200 feet per second, fast for a 45-70, perfect shot. It went, 30 yards? The next bear I shot was a 7-foot black bear with a 30-30 with a 120 grain bullet going 2,800 feet per second. Much, much smaller bullet.
Much bigger bear.
Much bigger bear. Smaller hole. Disruption of vital function. I didn't make the same exact shot on both of them, but the disruption of vital function was, it's hard to say with the speed difference and everything. You really can't tell without ballistics gel or something,
right.
But the 7-foot bear down right there just fell over and twitched.
Yeah.
Dead.
Yep.
It kind of blew my mind when it happened.
It's a different individual animal.
I couldn't believe it. I was like, what in the world?
Yeah. So don't judge the effectiveness of a round off of how fast an animal falls over.
Well, and that's what I like with the deer. Because you're shooting a lot of them.
Yeah. You have a lot larger data set.
So you can see, okay, well, I've shot 4 deer with this gun, and I've shot 4 with this gun, all in different areas, and it's like, okay.
Different shot angles, different bullets.
Obviously, I'm shooting, a 300 short mag, shooting twice the weight of bullet at 500 feet per second faster.
Yep.
Is going to do a lot more damage.
Yep. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
So there's nothing wrong with the old ones. The 06, the 270. The 300 Win Mag at this point could be considered an old one.
It is at this point, yeah.
But the 308 Winchester, all those are fine choices. There's a writer for Outdoor Life, Tyler Friel.
Mm-hmm.
He has shot a number of his sheep, and he's shot a lot of sheep at this point, with a 25-06.
That's a great cartridge.
And he still talks about how much he loved killing sheep with that round. And it was 100 and something grain. I think it was a Nosler AccuBond.
Okay.
And I can ask him for clarification later if I'm wrong on that. But it's a great choice of round for that size of an animal. And then he's killed some of the 6.5 Creedmoor, several with them now, I think. You don't need a lot of cartridge to kill most of the animals up here.
Right.
This year, shot a bull moose with a 22 arc. With a match bullet.
Yeah, it.
That goes against everything that is traditional knowledge, right? Because you're supposed to have
ain't no 375.
But he broke the femur with it.
He did, and it didn't run very far.
Nope. I would say that moose died in the exact same amount of time that it would have if it would have been shot with a 300 Win Mag. Probably. In that exact situation, that moose didn't die any slower than it would have if it would have been shot with a 0.6 or 300 Win Mag.
Right.
So, is it a bad choice? Is it the perfect choice? No.
No.
Not in my opinion.
This is where I go with that. Because...
But he was experimenting.
He was experimenting for one. Yes, he was experimenting for one.
Yep.
And you can do that. Now, should he then take an even smaller, slower 22 or some kind of center fire, that's within caliber specifications, right? Because you can get, well, what's next? 223 Remington?
People do it in Alaska every year.
Right. Yeah, they do. A lot of people do shoot moose with a 223 with an AR, and they just unload on it until it goes down. I don't think that's the way you should do it, but a lot of people do. But the big difference, I think, between something like what Tyler Friel did and a lot of people who might want to do the same thing is they're going to go buy a rifle, buy ammo, and I think this is the biggest issue, is they're just going to, they think, oh, hey, you don't need that big of a gun, I'm going to shoot what's comfortable, and they buy something small and light that's fun to target shoot, fun to hunt with, nothing wrong with that. Yeah. But then trying to hunt a big animal and not understanding what it takes to do it. Tyler Friel doing that, he knew everything he was doing. And there's a lot more people besides Tyler Friel doing this too. You're
talking about Tyler Friel, the guy that has shot grizzly bears with stone arrowheads. Right. Tyler Friel, the guy who has shot a number of bears with a lead ball muzzle loader.
Mm-hmm.
He's shot some stuff with some different cartridges and rounds over the years.
It's no different than bow hunting.
Yeah.
Right? He's not going to shoot that moose in the chest, straight on in the chest with that 22 arc, or at a quartering shot, most likely. Any kind of heavy quartering shot wouldn't have been an option for him. He would have waited. He waited until he had the shot he needed to know he was going to kill the animal. Right. And that's the thing. There's nothing wrong with taking a 22 arc moose hunting, experimenting, saying, hey, can this be done? Right? I kind of wanted to run into a brown bear. Not like run into one, but
right.
You know what I mean? But to come across a brown bear, something of decent size that I was willing to shoot with that 6 arc, I could shoot a brown bear with a 6 arc and be like, that's pretty cool.
And I wanted you to.
Yeah, that would have been pretty cool.
Yeah.
With an 88 grain bullet. That's a lot smaller than most people hunt brown bears with.
Absolutely.
But
absolutely it is.
But does that mean when I go brown bear hunting, I'm going to take a 6 arc? Probably not.
Yeah.
Because I really want to, I want a little bit more guarantee of having a dead bear. And it's the same reason I take a rifle. I've been taking a rifle deer hunting, back to what we started with the beginning of the show. Same reason we've been taking rifles deer hunting is it's a lot more guaranteed that I'm going to come home with some dead animals.
Exactly.
Than a bow.
So again, don't confuse experimentation from people that have a lot more field time and a lot more opportunity to shoot those big animals than you might.
Right.
If you're coming to Alaska on a guided hunt or on a once-in-a-lifetime do-it-yourself trip, I wouldn't be experimenting too much with the cartridge and bullet type.
Well, even if Tyler Friel wanted to kill all the rest of his moose with a 22 arc, and it was no longer experimenting, it's just the way he did it.
Yeah.
He would still do it with the same ethics.
Parameters,
and parameters, that he had to do. It would be within a certain distance, certain shot placement, right? Yeah. There's a certain number of things that you just need to hit, the check mark. The smaller you go on cartridge size, no matter what animal you're hunting, the parameters with which you can use that get smaller, right? They get tighter. Yeah. Doesn't matter what you're hunting. If you're using a smaller bullet.
Now, playing devil's advocate here, okay? Just because you shoot a .338 Win Mag moose does not mean that you should immediately take a Texas Heart Shot up the rear end.
Correct. I'm not advocating for that either.
Right.
But I see what could be construed from what I said.
But you have to play this from both sides.
Right. And this is why I understand this is such a polarizing issue.
Yeah.
Today and yesterday on the internet, oh my goodness, has people been split over an issue. Yeah. It's crazy to me how split people are. And I'm not going to bring up the issue, but like how quickly people were united. Somebody said something that a bunch of people thought they disagreed with. I think they haven't thought it through all the way, but that's beside the point. And all of a sudden now it's just like all these people who were their heroes 24 hours ago, now they're alienated. Now they're just, I can't believe this person, and this is the same thing, and it's the same thing happens everywhere when we have people. When you have an issue and somebody can take a side on it, somebody's going to take the other side, right? Somebody's going to be, you should never use a cartridge that small for an animal like that.
Yeah.
And would I ever hunt a moose with a 22 caliber? I don't, specifically a .224. I don't think I would. Just don't think I would.
Yeah.
Like, Tyler proved it could be done. Great. I want to bring meat home for my family, and I want a pretty good guarantee I'm going to do it. So I'm going to bring a .375.
Yeah, he's going to chuckle when he hears that.
And not saying I wouldn't hunt with my 300 short mag. For a moose,
no.
Which I have,
that's a fine
I've
round for that.
400 yard plus shot on a moose. I mean, just put it down, right? But like you say, the next one could run a long ways.
It could. It probably wouldn't, though.
It probably wouldn't, but you just don't know.
I like to chalk up your idea of the 375 as your moose gun to it's just what you want to do.
It's what I want to do. And you know what? I also kind of want to see what happens.
It sounds good. It feels good. I'm going to do that.
Yeah, because I can.
And there's nothing wrong with it.
And, part of me wants to shoot a deer with a 375, but I don't want to ruin that much meat.
I have. And when you shoot them in the ribs, it doesn't.
Well,
it doesn't do that much.
I would imagine it doesn't.
No.
And that's the thing with deer, though. You're not, even less than moose, you're not guaranteed that perfect shot.
No.
And you have, especially with the blacktail in southeast, you've got a few seconds to make a decision and decide if you're going to shoot.
Yep.
And if you do hit something in that front end of that deer with that 375, there's probably not going to be much of that front end left.
If you hit the front end of a deer with a 270, there's going to be not much of it left.
If you hit a front end of a deer with a 300 short mag or a 7 mag or whatever, but
that's what it boils down to, and that's just comes back to it of just because you're moose hunting with a 375 next time you go doesn't mean that that's what you're advocating is the best moose cartridge.
I'm not.
It's just what you're trying out.
Right, but if I shot a deer with an 88 grain, weight size pretty proportionate. I feel like for animal size to bullet size.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Give it a try.
To me, it's a fun thing.
Yeah.
Right. I've killed moose with a 30-06. I've killed moose with the 300 short. I'd like to kill moose with something else.
At the end of the day, I think an important thing to keep in mind, because again, we're not the only ones talking about cartridges.
No.
For different ideas about cartridges and bullet sizes and weights and all those things. There is a lot of chatter going on about this right now. A lot of chatter. And that's okay. I think discussion is healthy.
It is.
But not division. Don't take up one side so adamantly that you, number one, that you stop learning. Right?
Right.
When I first heard about all this, probably the last couple of years, my first thought was, really? Are you kidding me? And then I saw more and more information about it, and there were more people doing it and more people that I trusted that did things with smaller rounds than I thought were the correct choice for that particular animal. And the results were just fine. You can't argue with the dead animal.
Right.
The problem is who you get your source from and just how big is their data set. The OT6 has a pretty impressive data set. A 22 ARC on moose has a pretty small data set.
Right.
And this is not to single out that one particular moose kill that Tyler had this last fall.
The one we probably know the most about.
Well, yes, it's the one that we know the most about because he's a local guy, and you know we've seen the kill shot video, and he's been on some other podcasts talking about it, and so that was one of the things that I feel like, at least on the social media platform that I'm on, seemed to appear the most on, and other people talking about it on forums or whatever that was, and on Facebook, and so you see it, and so that becomes a very polarizing thing, and I don't think it should be. Your opinion ought to be just that, your opinion. You don't have to convince everybody else that you're right and that they're wrong. Understand that it can be done more than one way, and so you don't choose to do it that way. That's fine. But don't die on the hill that, well, I'm not going to listen to anything this guy has to say anymore because he did this or that. Or this guy wrote an article about using match bullets for big game hunting. A lot of guys do that. And a lot of guys would tell you they'd never had a bullet failure. And then you have the other side of the fence that says, oh, that's really, really dangerous because I've done it 5 times and I had 2 failures. Could they be true? Yeah, that could be the case. Could they have had a different issue that they're not aware of that caused what they call as a failure?
Right.
Yes. And could they be blinded just by the fact that they have a small data set to compare to? Yeah, that's possible. So understand that you could be wrong on what you think has always been right. But you don't have to buy into it just because it's cool.
Right.
That's where I think it gets dangerous. Because, for instance, there was a fella, and that you and I both know who it is, and he had been a subscriber to the theory that you need to shoot something big, something heavy, something fast, and combine all these things, and you need to shoot something big to hunt in Alaska. And when some of these other podcasts, some of these other individuals came out and said, hey, we've been shooting animals with 6.5 Creedmoor or 6mm Creedmoor.
Right.
Some of these real...
6 ARC is becoming quite popular, too.
Some of these smaller rounds. Yeah. All of a sudden, he said, well, I'm selling my 300 Win Mag because I don't need it. And he went out and he bought a 6mm or maybe it was a 6.5. And he just made the choice just like that. Is that advisable? Probably not. He was a good shot with a 300 Win Mag.
Right.
He was a fine shot with it. But he made the decision based on arguably a relatively small data set for those cartridges. And the bullets that he's going to shoot are not what he was shooting out of a 300 Win Mag. Not the same construction type.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think that you should just subscribe to a theory just because somebody's doing it. If you have something that works, be content to just listen to other ideas and say, that's really interesting. I'm going to learn more about that. Right. And then you continue to hunt with whatever you've been using. It doesn't
mean you have to try it.
No.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go buy a 22 Creedmoor or 22 ARC or a 6mm Creedmoor or even a 6.5 Creedmoor and go shoot a moose with it.
Right.
I don't want to. It's just that has zero interest to me.
Right. You know, so I'm shooting what has become a fairly popular hunting cartridge, which is a 6 ARC. Yeah. And I'll probably continue to use it for deer, right? If I don't buy and build and experiment with something else.
Yeah.
Because it's the never-ending rabbit hole. But I don't think I'd ever, maybe for deer I would, but nothing for anything bigger would I ever want to load a match-grade bullet. I think, why would I load a match-grade bullet? I'm not shooting to a distance where I need it.
Yeah.
And I know I can shoot something like a monolithic that I've never had fail. I'm not saying it won't happen. I'm not saying it hasn't happened. but have had much better record of doing exactly. I know exactly what it's going to do, and and I've had results that are possible to argue with.
Yeah.
Right.
That comes back to that terminal performance.
Right.
And sure, a 6mm arc would probably kill a moose just fine.
Sure, it would in the right spot.
If you shot it in the lungs and you kept your shot placement proper and you kept your distance within capabilities and within reason, it'd do just fine. But don't just buy into something wholeheartedly just because a certain group recommends it.
Right.
If what you're doing is working, I wouldn't be doing a whole lot of changing, especially when you're talking about potential once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to either come to Alaska,
here,
whether it's guided or DIY.
Right.
You are probably only going to get one chance at a big bull moose if you're coming up here on a moose hunt.
Right.
Odds are.
Right. Well, if you're
probably only going to get one chance.
Most likely your guide, if you are guided, isn't going to let you shoot something that small.
Sure.
But, and I know we're not just talking to those people either.
No.
Right.
We're talking to people that message us on social media platforms and say, hey, what do you think about a 308 for hunting up here?
Right.
And we respond and say, great. Hammer on.
Right.
Pick a good bullet, practice with it, put a decent scope on it, and shoot a bunch. Shoot it a bunch and go shoot whatever you want with it. I'm not going to say to someone who messages me and says, hey, I just got a job as a packer in Alaska and I'm going to get my guide license and I'm going to become a brown bear guide. Do you think I ought to carry a 308? Probably not.
Probably not. Yeah.
There is one guy that and I'm not going to say who it is necessarily, but I do know of one guide that at least used to carry a 308 Winchester as his brown bear rifle. He's alive. I don't think he's been bit. And there's a certain amount of brains that goes into that, but probably for most people, not the gun you should carry.
Right.
So it's very use specific. Getting back to the cartridges for hunting Alaska, if you are willing to hunt mule deer with it in the lower 48 or even a lot of whitetails, you're probably not far off. Now, if you're shooting an open sight 30-30 or something very old and, very heritage, I guess, whitetail rifle, then it might not be the right choice. Just the rifle itself might not be the right choice for hunting Alaska. But if you hunt deer with a 270 and that's what you've got and you know that gun and you want to come to Alaska to go on a caribou or sheep or moose hunt, bring the 270.
That's a lot different than an open sight 30-30.
Right. But within reason, or a 30-06. Or if you're coming up on a deer hunt and you hunt deer in the low 48 with a 243 Winchester, bring the 243. You don't have to go out and buy a new rifle because you're in bear territory. Carry a can of bear spray. Just don't use it in the wind.
Well, don't use it when the wind's blowing towards you.
So let the
or
bear,
your buddy, unless you really are mad at him and need an excuse.
Let the bear run past you in the charge and then turn around and kind of do a spin move and then deploy the bear spray as he's wheeling and dealing.
Preferably, you've just got a big enough rifle on you and you already put a bullet in him.
But again, don't base your cartridge selection on a what if. Base it within proper reason. Will it kill the animal at whatever distance I'm comfortable at with whatever bullet I'm going to choose, and choose your bullets carefully. We'll talk about that in the next episode about this. But at whatever shot angle that you think you might take, for me, I'm going to carry a rifle moose hunting that I can shoot a moose either quartering to me or quartering away. But ideally, I just shoot him through the ribs and it pops right through and goes out.
Right.
But I've got enough capability with my bullet selection and with the cartridge that if I only get that fleeting moment shot through the brush, quartering away, I can shoot him in the back of the ribs and that bullet's going to go through and hit the offside shoulder. And I'm going to get through the lungs and I'll have my moose. I wouldn't do that with a 6 Creedmoor necessarily.
Yeah, I don't think you'd ever want to do that with a 6 Creedmoor.
I don't know that it would get through the stomach.
Right.
It could.
Well, it's not that it wouldn't get through the stomach. It's just how fast is
get through the stomach and then into the lungs and kill it.
Right.
Fast enough that it's not going to be an hour after hour blood trail job if you find it.
Right. And then how far is the pack out?
Right. Or has the meat spoiled because you found it 2 days later?
Right.
Or is there a bear on it?
Right.
And then you lose the whole thing. So that there are considerations to be had, and I'm not just saying that for any purpose you can shoot whatever you want. To an extent, sure, but use your head a little bit. Shoot something adequate. What we've mentioned here today is only the common calibers. .6, 270, 6.5 Creedmoor, 300 Win Mag, 338 Win Mag. Within each one of those bore diameters, there are probably
dozens,
5 to a dozen different options within that caliber. 6.5s, you've got a lot of 6.5 to choose from. You can shoot a 6.5 that shoots 3,400 feet per second with a 127 grain bullet. That's a screamer of a round.
Right. You could shoot a 6.5 Grendel.
I would shoot a moose quartering away with a 6.5 300 Weatherby with the right bullet.
Right.
I would shoot one.
Right.
And I would, shoot one quartering away with probably a lot of confidence. But
you wouldn't do it with a 6.5 Grendel.
Nope.
It's just too slow.
So picking your cartridge is important.
At some point, I'd really like to just nerd out on cartridges. Anything we find interesting about weird cartridges.
Yeah.
At some point.
As far as rifles, that there are a lot of options for rifles.
Mm-hmm.
Hear that feedback?
It's fine. It won't come through the...
Okay. As far as rifles are concerned, there's really not a lot to say about necessity for rifles up here. If you are living up here or moving up here and you're looking for a good option, I would steer towards something that's stainless or Cerakoted with some kind of a synthetic stock, whether it's a molded plastic stock like what comes on a Tikka, that's impervious to moisture. Moisture is your biggest enemy up here. And if you hunt on the coast, moist salt water is that's enemy number one. So corrosion, corrosion resistance is probably one of my biggest factors, I would say, with picking a rifle to hunt. So stainless or Cerakoted, you still have to maintain it. You can still rust a gun out that's a stainless steel. Action-wise, man, just pick something that works. You don't have to spend a ton of money on a rifle. I would be more concerned about picking a capable cartridge that I can find ammo for and practice with than I would be about spending $2,000 on a factory rifle. Right. I'd rather spend $1,000 on a factory rifle and then $500 or more on a capable scope, and then the rest on ammo.
Well, that's a big thing too. A lot of people look at, I'm just going to go buy a $2,000 rifle because I can afford it, and $2,000 got to be better than a $1,000 rifle. That's really not the case.
It
can be.
It is the case when you're using it to its full potential.
But it's not always. There are many $1,000 rifles that are advertised as this when they may have better quality parts, but overall they just haven't been made to the standard that they're advertised, and they don't shoot any better, and a lot of times they shoot worse than a Tikka. Not all, but many.
Certainly some.
Right.
Yeah.
You mentioned the Christensen problems and stuff there. Yep.
We both knew people in the last few years that went to the store and bought a Christensen over the counter.
And if you search that on YouTube, oh my goodness, you talk about a rabbit hole.
There are some forums that you can be on. There's a Facebook page.
The forums, the Facebook pages, the YouTube pages.
There was a new post on the Facebook page today that I happened to see glancing across there, and a guy had a severe problem with a Christensen rifle. Now, again, they're still sorting through some of those issues in the last several years. But for the most part, pick something decent and just learn how to shoot it. Pick something with a decent barrel, a decent action. A Tikka is a good place to start, but Savage makes some decent rifles. I don't like their action as much as I like a Tikka action.
Yeah.
But they seem to shoot well.
You know what's funny about the Savage thing? I've been wanting to get a Savage just because of the action, because it's so unique.
Yeah, it's different.
It's a lot, and I have that one action I might still try to do something with, although I think it's impossible to find a stock.
You could.
So.
Bergara makes a lot of factory, relatively affordable rifles that would certainly fit that bill. But again, and this is another thing to consider too. If you're coming to Alaska, think about availability. We're not on the road system in the lower 48. It ain't exactly easy to get ammunition here from the lower 48. It can be done, but it's not easy.
You're not going to get online order at your doorstep.
and you're going to get it, most likely if you're buying factory loads, you're going to get it here. So what's available here?
Yeah.
And there is a lot available in town. Sportsman's carries a lot of ammo, Frontier Outfitters, Alaska Ammo, and a few other smaller shops around town, Iron and Wood. But they're going to always have more of the old reliables than they are the new fancy stuff.
Right.
And odds are when they get something new and fancy in, they're going to sell it out for a while.
That's why you're just making those multiple trips a week.
Yeah,
watching. To see, is there boxes? Oh, well, I'm here. There's boxes, but man, I really can't afford that this week.
Yeah, well, and that's where you get into, if you buy something like a 300 Weatherby, and you're going to buy Weatherby ammunition, you are looking at spending a lot more money for 20 rounds.
Right. When you find the ammo.
When you find it, right. And if you travel to a remote community in Alaska to do your hunt, and you show up and your ammo doesn't, what's going to be available in that small community to buy? 300 Win Mag, 30-06.
Maybe. 5.56.
5.56. Right.
308 and 5.56.
Right. But the old faithfuls are going to be there.
Yeah.
Odds are, if there's any decent outdoor store, it's probably not going to be super top of the line ammo.
There's not very many.
But you'll have ammo.
Places in Alaska that even have an outdoor store.
Well, sure. But I'm talking about traveling up. So if you were to land like in Kodiak, what are you going to be able to find? If you land in Juneau or Ketchikan.
Juneau, you'd have some good options.
Yeah, right. But still, if you show up with a 6.5 300 Weatherby,
good luck.
You might not find any in Juneau.
Yeah.
You might.
You could get it. It'd be easier to get there.
Right.
And if you had to get it shipped there.
The area that we hunt, the outdoor store in that community, I've never seen any Weatherby ammo. Never.
Not in any of those stores there.
In 9 years there.
Every once in a while you see something you can't find in Fairbanks.
Yeah. But what I always do see there is an absolute ton of 243 Winchester, 270 Winchester, 30-06, 6.5 Creedmoor, 300 Win Mag. And that's about it.
Right.
And then there's some 338 and 375 mixed in there too. But for the most part, it's what's easily available because everybody has one and it's easy to find. So keep that in mind too. If you're traveling to hunt in Alaska, you might want to keep in mind. Or if you show up in a guide camp and you got to shoot your rifle more than you think just to check your zero, maybe your scope was off, maybe it got bumped in travel, and you end up shooting a lot of your ammo, just having to re-zero, what's the outfit going to have on hand in base camp? I would probably bring something that somebody else is going to have, whether it's another client or one of the guides or the outfitter that has a stash of something laying around that camp that you're going to be able to bum a few rounds off
300
of.
Win Mag.
300 Win Mag. 30-06. Somebody's going to have something for that. So, have we beat that horse to death?
Definitely not.
Well,
I think we're good for now, but
just cartridge chatter.
Yeah.
I suppose the bottom line is shoot what's been proven to be reliable. If you want to try something new, that's fine. But keep an open mind.
Right. Don't get stuck on something that somebody loves in a video, especially something new, right? You watch something on YouTube, maybe
some paid promo.
Well, whether paid or not, there's a lot of really good YouTube shooter channels, right? Ranging from the military side to the fun side to hunting specific side, right? And everything. There's everything out there, and there's many of them. And you're going to watch one where somebody loves a certain cartridge that they just tested out for some reason, and it may be something usually new or hard to find or whatever. And like, I love this because there was one I watched a while ago, and it was a impact shooting. Was it impact shooting? I don't remember if it was impact shooting the channel or not, but it was it was one of the I think it was the 30 Sherman, right, which is a Wildcat cartridge, which I might get one day. Might get some Shermans. I like what Sherman has done.
About that, yeah.
He has done some awesome stuff in the Wildcat. Some of the stuff that you'd think would exist in factory, and usually after a while, something like what he has done has come out. But and they loved it, and they shot a better match than they'd ever shot, and all this kind of stuff. And this rifle they'd built, right? But it could be so easy to get. And even I was for a little while, I was like, well, maybe that's what I need. But in reality, 7 rem mag, 300, or I had those backwards, 300 Win mag, 7 rem mag, 30-06, any one of those would shoot just as good given the time and the experience, right? For hunting. Yeah. Because you're not shooting 1,000 yards, right. 1,400 yards.
Right. For hunting applications.
Right. It's really, really easy to get locked into something that you may have never heard of before. Like, oh, I need one of these. And I definitely shoot a little bit more obscure cartridges than you do.
Yeah. I would agree with that.
And not all of them, but some of them. And I even am leaning towards more of those. Yeah. I like them. I love it.
Because it comes back to that experiment.
And there's nothing wrong with that, but you need to have everything in line. Right, because there's a lot of times where I'll start buying ammo because usually that's where it starts. I know I want this, so I'll buy some ammo when I see it on the shelf because I know once I finally get the gun, there may not be ammo on the shelf.
Yeah.
Right. But I'll start buying ammo. Maybe I'll buy dies. Maybe I'll buy brass. I might buy everything but the gun. And then I'll get the gun, and then when it's time to go hunting, I'm still not ready. So what do I grab? The short mag, right?
Yeah.
Right. And it's really, really easy to get locked in on something, and that's okay to do that, just like we've talked about, and like Tyler does he's shot many more variety of stuff than I have, but I love shooting animals with a variety of things. I want to shoot, I've got a rather unique gun I want to shoot a bear with this year. This year. And to make that happen there's going to be some work going into that. And but it's not something I may ever shoot a bear with again. I just want to do it to do it.
Yeah.
Right. I think you know what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm. I do.
And that'll be a fun one. Mm-hmm. But I think that's the biggest takeaway. You can absolutely, there's nothing wrong with nerding out on some obscure or new or old or ancient or whatever, some cartridge that was developed in the 1900s that nobody's heard of today because, somebody made it and there were 100 rifles made. And whatever, and so you find a rifle, you may have a rifle built, and you find some brass, and there's nothing wrong with that. But don't do that if you can't take your 30-06 to the range and hit a plate at 300 yards. You probably shouldn't be putting the money into the fancy, expensive, obscure, or whatever it is that you like. Right? I've gotten into gas guns. ARs. I've looked at some other options for gas guns and stuff that's available for hunting. I really like the idea of the semi-auto, but that's not where you should start.
Probably for most people.
For most people, now sure, an AR-10, AR-15, pretty easy to work with, but there's so much more going on with that gun.
Right.
Right. And knowing every part and where it goes and how to fix it, and taking it apart, and yeah.
I 100% agree with you. And that's another good point, too, is whatever you do choose to hunt with, you ought to know how to strip the bolt apart.
Right.
And at least just field strip it and clean it.
If you can't pull the firing pin and see what it looks like around it, right.
Know how to do that on your rifle. That's an important part of maintenance. We talked about corrosion. There was a stretch of years there where I was deer hunting for a couple of years consecutively with an old friend of mine, and he hasn't been deer hunting there in a while. But a couple of years into going down there for that hunt, I asked him. I said, "Hey, how does your firing pin assembly work? Or, I'm sorry, not work, but look like the inside of your bolt and your firing pin. Like, do you have any corrosion that you've noticed in there? Because I would take mine apart whenever I got home and put a little oil on it and clean it, and then clean it off and put it away. And he had never taken taken the firing pin out of his bolt assembly. There was some significant corrosion going on in there, and I don't understand quite how it got that bad. Outside of it was just salt water that was never cleaned off.
My 10 mil, my brand new 10 mil. I got home and I was like, I should take this firing pin out. So I figured it out and popped the firing pin out, and I was shocked. A corrosion around the spring and the firing pin. Now, most of the rest of the gun is Cerakoted or plastic, right?
Yeah.
Or stainless, but there's a few parts in there, the spring and stuff, that aren't.
But years of that left
and
uncleaned?
Honestly, left uncleaned, or what do? You stick it in the safe and it sits there for a year or whatever until you use it, and you hear there's a lot of stories about people's guns going off.
Big air quotes there.
Right. I'm not going to mention specific models or anything, but from rifles to pistols, maintenance, right? And I have seen a lot of stories, right? NDs, right? Negligent discharge. I've seen a lot of stories of those where it wasn't old and it was grandpa's gun or it was dad's old rifle that he pulled out, right? And picked it up, we're carrying it with a round in the chamber, whatever it was, which there's nothing wrong with hunting with a round in the chamber. Don't load the round until you're ready to use it. Right? Finger off the trigger, carrying it with a round in the chamber, gun pointed in a safe direction, right? You're ready to use a rifle. You know it's loaded. You're treating it as if it's loaded, as you should always treat a gun. But there's that point. There's okay to hunt with a round in the chamber at certain points in the hunt, right? Unload it when you're done. But, somebody do that, round in the chamber, lean it against a tree, and it falls over and goes off, right? And it was grandpa's old whatever or dad's old whatever, and it hadn't been touched in years and hadn't been cleaned. They didn't go through it. Like, and I think with pistols and stuff, I think you see a lot of the same thing. It's so easy. With a lot of these striker fire pistols, there's not a lot of parts, but there's not a lot of space inside those upper slides for anything. Like most rifles actually have some space, and there's a lot of water gets in there and it rusts up, and then right something can pop free because it's corroded because it hasn't been cleaned. Anyway, that's another.
That's kind of a different tangent. I mean, obviously
it's easy to go down those.
Right. We're not condoning that anybody do things our way. If you want to hunt with a round in the chamber, that's fine.
Yep.
We do at some points. There are times that I don't. That's up to you.
Right.
And hunting with a round in the chamber, if you lean your gun up against a tree, you need to understand that even if it's a brand new rifle with a perfectly functioning safety, if you bump that safety and didn't know it, and then the gun falls over and a twig hits the trigger, it's still going to go off. So
exactly right.
Just practice good gun safety. But
my biggest, I went off on a tangent. My biggest point was the longer the gun sits without maintenance, the higher chance there is of having a problem.
You should clean your guns.
That you shouldn't have. That's the majority of NDs. That aren't some stupid kid sitting in front of his phone in his mom's basement waving a pistol around. Are lack of maintenance.
Yep. Being responsible with it part of responsibility is maintenance, taking care of it. So anyway, well, I think that should address the questions that we got about that.
I think it does for now.
Just hunt with what you know works if that's what you've got. If you want to try something new, then hammer on. Good luck. And it'll probably work out fine. If you don't want to and that's not your cup of tea, then stick with the tried and true, the old faithful. Ye old dirty 30, the 30-06.
The 308.
The 6.5 needs more.
Yeah.
The 338 Ultra Recoil.
I haven't heard that one before, but
well, shoot a 308 or shoot a 338 often enough, you'll come up.
I'm sure, yeah.
But shoot with something that you're confident in, and don't let the internet change your mind.
Right.
If that's your cup of tea, then by all means, sip away. But if you're coming to Alaska, I guess the gist of all this is you don't need anything special.
I think there's a lot of Alaskans that will enjoy this too. There's a lot of people in Alaska that grew up with something like a 30-30 or a 30-06 or whatever it is, and they just don't know.
I would shoot anything in this state with a 30-06. I'd shoot anything in this state with a 270 if that's all I had.
You can say with a 308 or maybe even a 30-30.
Yeah, just get close enough.
Yeah,
it'll kill it. So, anyway, this has been fun. If you like the Great Alaska Hunting Podcast, you enjoy the show, enjoy these little banter sessions, I suppose. We're going to have some more material coming out here shortly. We're going to have a short episode at some point here in the near future talking about hammer bullets specifically. It'll be a little bit shorter format, a little bit more detailed, and we'll have some of our recovered hammer bullets here for the video display if you'd like to see that. And we'll have another episode at some point as well in the same style of format on talking about initial ascent packs, kind of comparing some different packs that we've used, some packs that I still use, and when we use them and for what purpose and kind of how to use it. And then our next main episode here in 2 weeks is going to be talking about bullets and bullet selection and things that have changed and your options. We touched briefly on bullets in relation to ballistic capability, but the next one will be a little bit more focused on the bullet performance and what bullets which model of bullets, if you will, are built to perform to what specification upon impact, and the different results that you might see within those different designs. So again, just keep an open mind when it comes to what you're hearing from people that are what I would consider on the cutting edge of innovation and experimenting and trying these different things. Just because it's being done doesn't mean that you should do it.
Right.
Most of these guys that are doing this to a high level, like we talked about Tyler Friel, they have a lot more impressive hunting pedigree than we do, and that most people do, that are coming hunting in Alaska. And Tyler makes a living off of gun knowledge and hunting knowledge. He's been doing it all of his life, hunting and shooting, and there's a different level of competence that comes with that. So understand that, and don't get wrapped around the axle just because someone else is experimenting with something doesn't mean that that's where the trend should go for you. Hunt with confidence, with a proven round and a proven bullet to match, and the most important thing is shoot your rifle. Shoot it a lot. Shoot hundreds and hundreds of rounds a year if you can. More is better, but practice.
Right.
So that when you do get that shot opportunity, you are not the weakest link. So if you like the show, thank you for listening. Leave us a 5-star rating on whatever platform you're listening on. We greatly appreciate that. And a written review is nice, a positive written review. We've gotten a handful of those already on the show. We appreciate your guys' support. We appreciate the listener questions that kind of prompted this episode to be made. We got a handful of those after our episode came out talking about the deer hunt where Mo chose the 6 ARC. So kind of was spurred from some of these cartridge experiments, if you will. So if you do have any more questions for us, what's our email, Mo?
It's info at greatalaskahuntingcompany.com.
So not the Great Alaska Hunting Company.
So at greatalaskahuntingcompany.com.
Or you can find us on Instagram at Great Alaska Hunting Company, or you can look up either Mo or myself on Instagram. Just search our names, or your handle is Modrenalin and mine is The Endless Hunter. So, anyway, we appreciate you listening. Happy New Year's to all of you. Enjoy the off-season obsession with gear and guns and ballistics and getting ready for spring season, which is not that far away.
So, it's one of those things that it's not that far away. I'm excited for it, but save some money.
The obsession continues. Well, be safe out there and stay warm wherever you're at. It's not cold here yet. No, still above 0 today.
Is it really?
Yeah.
It was below 0 for a few days there.
Well, I think it's 0 out right now, but
cruise.
Well, 2 above mine says 0. Anyway, we'll see you guys in 2 weeks.